Welcome to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times, sponsored by MSA Safety. In this series, we bring you sessions from the Emergency Services Show and the Emergency Tech Show 2025. If the government is to achieve its aim to halve knife crime and violence against women and girls over the next 10 years, it's going to need policing to be on top of its game when it comes to data. In this episode, we focus on how data about place, geospatial data, is key, and how some forces are using it to focus resources and drive down crime.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Egbe Manners. I work for Ordnance Survey as the market development lead. So where OS kind of come into all of this. Historically, we've always kind of supported the country right from military over 225 years ago. And now we've kind of adapted and transformed in line with technology this day. So as you all know, it's telling my age, buying records in Woolworths, now we're all moving to getting streaming music from Spotify. So we need to be able to adapt to how people want to receive data. In terms of kind of trying to build that capability, we're engaging with the community and working quite closely with community and partners to understand those needs. And it's in the process of doing that we work quite closely with Devon and Cornwall Police and with Cumbria Police. So with that in mind, we'll let the guys introduce themselves and let's get this going.
Good afternoon, my name's Martin Jackson and I'm the ICT Operational Communications Lead for Cumbria and Ceri.
Hi everyone, I'm Ceri Lloyd. I'm the Problem Solving and Designing Out Crime Lead for Devon and Cornwall Police Force.
And I'm Robert Goldsmith and I'm the Geospatial Lead for Devon and Cornwall Police and Dorset Police.
Thank you, guys. So what we're going to do is the guys have a few slides to kind of bring their talk to life. And to start with, Martin's going to go.
Right, so although we're here to speak about geospatial evidence-based policing and problem solving and the safer streets work that we do, I'm actually going to talk about Cumbria Road Harm Index and how we're utilising that. So to begin with, some terminology to understand. So there's a crime harm index. So not all crimes are equal. You really need to take the severity of the crime into consideration when you are looking at crime counts. So if there is an area where there's been 20 crimes and that is now 10 crimes this year, it might not be that it's safer if those 10 crimes are murders and the 20 crimes were antisocial behaviour. So to enable us to do that, there's a thing called the Cambridge Crime Harm Index, and that gives you a figure that you can utilise for that's based on sentencing guidelines. So for a crime to occur, you need an offender, a location and a victim, and the best way to stop that is, detection, not detection, you want prevention. So you want to be able to stop that offender, protect the victim, or check the location. With evidence-based policing, we also use a 3T approach, which is target, test and track. So to target, you identify the worst offenders, to identify the most at risk and identify the times and locations. To test, you apply a treatment, an intervention to disrupt the criminal victim or remove the opportunity. And then you track it, which is constantly reviewing the failure of the success or failure of the treatment, an intervention to judge the effectiveness. Displacement is counterproductive. Knowing what isn't effective is sometimes as valuable as knowing what works. And also we use the SARA model, or sometimes that's the SARA model, which we look at the objective, so what you want to achieve, scanning, identify what the issues are, analysis, what's the underlying nature of the problem, response, developing a solution, and assessment, that constant review. So for me, I started 30 years ago in RF engineering, doing broadcast TV and radio, through to UHF and VHF trunked radio systems for the emergency services. After a brief stint at Gatwick Airport doing UK radios for airfields, I returned to Cumbria, where I've supported and managed the mission critical voice systems provided by Airwave Motorola, and I've been doing that for the last 17 years. As part of that role, we utilised mapping to assist with fault finding and ensuring coverage across the force. We deployed resource location information to assist with command control decisions and improve operational and situational awareness, as well as improving officer safety. We looked at the coverage that we received against the requirements that we needed to support policing operations and officer safety. We also needed to include risks that officers and the public are exposed to. The presentations of different crimes with the crude form of harm enabled us to provide this information to senior officers. So we could look at our current coverage, we could look at what our requirements were, and we managed to change them to this level, which saved us £750,000 a year out of a £1 million per year bill year on year. To do that, we looked at a specific area and we did a crude type of management on the harm. So we could see where the harm was, and that gave us the location of high risk, high harm, where we needed to concentrate and provide the best support. It was at this stage that a Detective Inspector, Dr. Rob Ewing, started me on my evidence-based policing journey. He, with the support of Deputy Chief Constable Blackwell, enabled me to legitimise my work by doing the Cambridge Centre for Evidence-Based Policing course. And I completed that with the support of Inspector Stu Woodward, who is sat over at Mark 43 over there as Mr. Stuart Woodward now. At the time, we were re-establishing our roads policing unit with Inspector Jack Stabler, who is unfortunately not here today. Jack was reviewing our road safety partnership, which has remained unchanged for several years. And it was centred around community concerns about speeding, but utilised a detailed Power BI type dashboard, which you can see here. Very little had changed over the last sort of 12 years, in fact, with the focusing on the same 5 roads, as you can see. Jack had a vision of, rather than focus on these 5 roads, which accounted for 4% of the total roads in Cumbria, we should apply some of the same type of harm views on the road traffics. There are some elements that can be moved across, such as parts of the problem triangle, offender, victim and location, for example. Using traditional victims, we were able to target offenders and victims, some of the groups more likely to cause RTCs. And we could then educate the specific groups of people and also target those with drink driving. So where we've been, the initial problems were that there's a significant disparity between some of the crime harm scores for some of the incidents. So death by dangerous driving, for example, gets a tariff of 1,095, but a death by careless driving only gets a crime tariff of 1. So it's hard to look at those when they're very similar outcome. When we combined it with the fact that not all road traffic collisions have an associated crime, we had to look at producing our own index, our own values. We looked at some of the data sets available, and we also then looked at the Department for Transport published figures for the human and emergency services costs for each collision. And by assigning these, so these were the assignations for the different types, we then gave them a value, and by utilising hexagons in what we ended up with 600-metre sides, we have looked at clustering models and data manipulation, but they can sometimes skew the figures and not give as good a representation. So what you can see there is the highest harm levels. And you can see the difference between the highest harm and the highest count. So when we look at each area, we can look at each of these hexagons. And for example, the first hexagon that was a hotspot, it's in a urban area, and all the RTCs are spread across the different road networks, so there's very little commonality between them. So that therefore just remains a hotspot. However, we did pick out a location that was a garage, and that became a harm spot because we could identify where the location was and see that it was caused by vehicles turning into or across traffic. So therefore we could do that. But who is the capable custodian there? As police, we can't really do anything to improve the situation there. Although we have got to send resources there for every incident, we can't change the road network, we can't change the paint, we can't cut the hedges. So this is where we use the OSARA model. That's taken to the Road Safety Partnership, and the appropriate organisation takes ownership of that particular element. So as you can see there, there's 9 areas, and of each of those there is an owner. Only one of those is owned by the police. So rather than us owning every single piece of this work, we've got national highways, county councils, and various other agencies who are taking ownership and managing the harm. So we've got, we've put road speed cameras on there, so we've had that element, but National Highways have put vehicles out to act as that capable custodian. We've engaged with a large number of forces, as you can see, across the UK, and also some across internationally, so South Africa, Dallas and Canada, and we've gone through this. And then we've also spoken to Newcastle University to legitimise the work we've been doing. They thankfully looked at it and said that the Road Harm Index does identify harm in areas that weren't traditionally picked up, and by utilising the harm index and the targeting, testing and tracking, it reduced harm in a successful manner. So where are we now? So we've got our harm spots, and we've engaged with Ordnance Survey, and they are providing some professionalism and polishing of the work we've done. So we can now get some really good views on what we've done so far with where road harm is. So we've professionalised and improved the presentation styles. They've assisted with road segmentation, because that's probably the best way to show it, rather than the hexagons, because hexagons aren't actually there. And we're looking to produce a scalable, deployable product that is treated on a reputable platform, and we're hopefully improving and progressing road harm.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay, so just to introduce ourselves again, my name is Robert Goldsmith. I'm the geospatial manager, and this is Ceri Lloyd, who's a problem-solving and designing out crime lead. Ceri's going to get you started, and then I'm going to cut in about halfway through and talk about my part of it. Obviously, this is why mapping solutions are integral to the Safer Streets mission for policing. And our example here is on around how we have built a 3D digital twin of Torquay. So I'll leave that now to Ceri and drop back in a sec.
Yeah. So Torquay, a population of about 139,000 people, one of the most deprived areas in the southwest region, high levels of vulnerability, approximately 70% higher rates of rough sleepers than national average. And within Torquay, Castle Circus was the main concern for residents. Around 84% were saying it was a real area of concern for their safety. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being extreme fear, it was coming in on average around 4. What was the concern? Antisocial behaviour, street drinking, drugs, ASB, all centred around the Leonard Stock Centre, a homeless hostel in Torquay. So the scanning clearly identified the concern, but what did the analysis show? So violence, public order offences, possession of drugs. This street, only 46 metres in length, accounted for 10% of all the incidents within Torquay, and is one of the highest demands on the police service. The street in question, Factory Row, on the left, and on the right-hand side is an area of disused land. When cleared, over 800 used needles were found. It's an endemic problem dating back years. What do we do? Traditional policing responses, engagement, orders, arrest, disruption, Some really innovative work with education collaborations, working with students to problem solve and hearing their ideas and solutions. And a naloxone peer-to-peer rollout, lots of things that I'd be more than happy to discuss with anyone today. But what we're here to focus on is how we could work smarter and use technology more efficiently when responding to some of the biggest problems. For example, the environmental visual audit. My designing out crime officer was walking around at least once a month, good for his step count, but what was it really achieving? Producing a large document every month that potentially people weren't even reading, and they definitely weren't acting on. So we were seeing little to no change, despite the community telling us that the environmental issues were a significant concern to them. So how could 3D mapping help? Could a visual representation of the report assist with the findings, and could solutions to problems be identified? Assessment and policing, we aren't always the best at doing this bit. We are feeding back to the community, we are seeing the outcomes, closure orders, arrests. We're well versed in the traditional qualitative and quantitative measures of assessment, but what we really wanted to understand is how we could look at it differently. How could 3D mapping, AI, help us to assess the effectiveness of our responses? How could we revolutionize our methods of assessment? So moving from percentage change of performance or long performance reports to a visual representation of progress and any corresponding impact on crime, visually seeing a before and after and laying the crime on top of that. Could that assist with buy-in? Could it help us to monitor change? And could it help to hold people to account? Could we test solutions to problems on the digital twin before we even implemented it? So we completed our traditional SARA, but what could 3D add? In summary, what were we trying to achieve? My strategic objective, to harness advanced technology such as 3D mapping and AI to revolutionize problem solving. In Torquay, we use 3D mapping to analyze that problem area, design evidence-based responses, test effectiveness, and assess the change through visual change analysis. What next? We've only just scratched the surface. There's lots of things we want to do and want to try. I'll hand over to Rob for the far more exciting part.
This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the emergency services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
How are we using 3D mapping in Torquay? I'm going to give you a bit of a demonstration. So what you'll see on the screen at the moment in front of you, this is our 3D model of Torquay that we built. This was built in-house using our own police drones. What we decided to do, though, is move beyond just having a 3D model of a location, but to make it a digital twin, we added in as much intelligence as we could. So things like street lighting were able to drop in their right locations. And as you see, if we zoom in here, the lampposts, everything fell in the exact right location. What you've got in front of you now as well is CCTV analysis. It shows view sheds from all of those cameras. So you could drop in and see, what are we covering? What aren't we covering? Is there a link to crime? So we use the 3D model to highlight that environmental visual audit. So we added the intelligence that you can see in front of you. Items such as photographs of specific locations were then tagged into that 3D model at that time, and people could move around, go to those locations and see very high resolution imagery related to the area where we were finding deprivation or other issues. So we moved forward with that and we started to plot other intelligence that we'd found on the ground. Items such as graffiti were then highlighted in the 3D model when they were found in person on the ground. What we wanted to do is say, could we reduce those site visits? Were there savings to be made, less travel, less time? Could it be safer for staff not being in these environments? And what other data could we extract from that digital twin? So here's another example here we have with bin waste and fly tipping. Again, a lot of this intelligence was gathered on the ground by staff who were going out and collecting this information. What we wanted to do is try and get away from that process, or at least investigate and have a bit of a play with if we could do that, which is why we then moved to an AI approach, which I'll come on to in a minute. So in front of you now is all of that kind of intelligence that we dropped into that model: recessed doorways, graffiti, other items that were linked to that crime. What we did at that point is we exported all of that intelligence out, and we compared it to our crimes that we had at the specific areas to see if we could find relationships between the items that we were finding in the digital twin and then the items, the crime stats and the other things that we had already at our headquarters. So analysing some of that 2D kind of data, those crimes, you can see that we get hotspots over different timeframes. So it's not about actually just looking over a 12-month period and saying this is as a peak for crime. Actually, let's break that down. Let's look and see if there are actually seasonal adjustments for that crime that we can make. Can we police it differently at different times of the year? Beyond that, we actually broke that down to temporal analysis as well. So actually, is it specific times during the day that we're seeing crimes in different areas? Again, just sending police officers out to these locations and saying that this is a hotspot's probably not intelligent enough to get the results that you'd want. So we split our data up and we analysed it by seasons. We split it up, we analysed it by times of the day, and we looked at those changes. And all of this was kind of going on aside to the 3D modelling, that digital twin process that we were looking at. So what we needed to do at that point was to bring that data back together. So we took that intelligence that we gathered in that environment and we decided to bring that into our digital twin. So what you'll see now is that temporal analysis that was in a kind of 2D format has now been brought into that 3D environment. So you could go right into those locations, you could see where the crime is high at that point, but also what is within that area in a real life kind of view of that, what makes up that area geographically that is then contributing to the specific crimes that you're getting. So the seasonal analysis was also added in. So here you can see the kind of spring crimes, the hot spots, where this was appearing. And again, the 3D digital twin gave people the ability to then go in and look at that environment. Is it that we've got recessed doorways in that environment? Is it that it's full of graffiti? Is it that it's got specific access routes that are adding to that? Again, you've got your autumn crimes here and your winter crimes as well. And yes, that graphic actually didn't provide any intelligence, but it kind of looks cool. So we added that in as well to keep officers interested in what we were showing them. We also flew the flight over different seasons as well. So you can see between December and July here, you're getting that kind of change analysis. So is it that CCTV sees more or less depending on the trees, depending on those seasonal adjustments? Is it that actually your lighting is less because you've now got more of these objects appearing in specific areas? Is it that we can actually identify items that have been removed? Have we now got less graffiti? Have we now got less objects that are appearing here? So one of the really good examples of how we use this model outside of what we'd earlier expected was to put in a camera and analyze it to see if it was a good location. If we put a camera in this location, would it identify the steps that we were interested in across the town? So as you see here, as we zoom in, we put then a mannequin, a model within that 3D model, and you could see that person, the shoulders, the head, you'd be able to identify that person if we chose to put that camera in, which we then did. So moving on to the future now, this is where it gets really interested. And as I said earlier, this picks up on a point that Richard made about using AI within these 3D models. We started to go down the route really only over the last couple of months, so this is very new to us. But could AI find us more results? Is it less time consuming? Can we upscale these projects vastly faster? And can we share those results on an online environment? So this is something that we've started to move into at the moment. As I say, this is a real pilot that I'm showing you here. We're not presenting you a finalized version of what the art of the possible is. We are just in that space of looking at what's achievable. So in August, only a matter of weeks ago, we started working with Ceri to look at whether we could start to use AI, certainly deep learning, to identify the objects within our model. So some of these slides now, these dark ones, they are from Ceri. So I'll try and read them the best I can with my knowledge without that being verbatim. But we went down a route of using deep learning, which can learn from its own errors, while machine learning needs human to intervene. Deep learning also requires much more data than machine learning and more computational power. Here's an example then of that model where we had put in 250 examples of that graffiti, and then we did some other work with that to bring that up to 1,250. The model then learned for that and was taking around 30 seconds per image to look at those models. And with the amount of images we had, 5,500 sort of oblique images, the total model was then analysed within around 45 hours. Obviously, staff weren't having to do things whilst this would be happening. So it worked perfectly well with the nadir, the straight down drone imagery that we were using, and it worked very well with the oblique, the kind of angled images that you'd get from the drone, but probably not as perfect as the nadir images. And the images you'll see on your screen kind of highlight the locations that were then picked up from this model. So what Esri are doing, and something we're looking at moving into with them, is a new release of their product, which will, instead of looking at those images that are getting put in, it will actually analyze that 3D model, and it will present us information from that model, which would take a lot less time then than it actually going through all of those several thousand images, which will speed up that process greatly. So in front of you now, we've got a bit of a fly through, a bit of an example of some of the data that that learning tool managed to find within the town. So as you can see here, and this is a really intriguing example, it found loads of graffiti that was on the roof of a car park. Now I believe with these ones, our officers that were walking around hadn't found these. And what we learned was that this kind of deep learning model was able to go and find areas that our staff might not be able to go to. It might be that people are creating criminal activities to get onto rooftops to do things to car parks, which then links to other crime in the area and kind of brings it together. It might be that it was on private land. It might be that it was in an inaccessible area or an unsafe area. So using the drones, does that help us give us a much more rich data set of the intelligence that you could find out from that kind of aerial perspective? And some of the examples here, again, these are very small paths, little walkways. We can't, without being notified, you probably wouldn't cover all of these areas when somebody was then moving around a town looking for this intelligence. And again, backs of fans behind sort of more industrial sized complexes and things. Probably not something that the public would have raised and that we would be speaking with the council with, but certainly a really fantastic example of how we could either combine those data or use drones or aerial imagery from other sources to give us that intelligence. So it's not perfect yet, I would suggest, but we're really working in the kind of concept space. We're kind of looking at what are the wins from this, and we think that a pilot project for this actually could showcase some things that would be really useful in the longer term. So there are potential issues, as I say. So at the moment, are we happy to trust the results that it finds? Is there amount of items needed to train the system? Can we find what we need? Flying drones over uninvolved people is a huge problem for us. So the kind of legal, the CAA side of being able to fly heavier drones, at the moment we have to use mini drones that are very light but very time consuming in that. And the amount of frequent flights, so do our drone units want to be going out and covering all of these areas every single week to get up-to-date data on this? And is that actually more of a pain than just having someone on the street look for that data? So we're not presenting a perfect solution in the sense that we're looking at this. So some of the pros of our digital twin is that you've got that online sharing. You could put in future 3D models of planning applications, BIM models. You could use it for multiple departments. It could find items for counterterrorism, ops planning, other areas, CCTV planning, easy analysis. But then you've got the cons. The drone laws still need to be agreed. It's time consuming. It's, the accuracy is unknown, the software costs. But the EVA, it gives you accurately identified locations. It gives you the ability to speak to the public, to see the problems, to revisit changes fast. But then you've also got your petrol costs, your time spent going there, visits to often sort of higher crimes or areas you might not want to keep sending people to be in. Poor weather, being outside amongst it, and then the lots of sites that you'd have to visit that a drone could probably do in one go. So that's our concept project at the moment. Thank you.
Brilliant, guys. It's amazing to kind of see that shift and that move from reactive policing to kind of being more proactive. And it sounds like for both that you've been on a journey. So I think I'll kind of kick off the questions, but as part of that journey, what's been the biggest surprise for you guys? Who wants to go first?
I'll go then, since I'm talking. Yeah, so I guess for us, the biggest surprise, the positive surprise is I think as we were going, the example where we could plot CCTV and see if it could show something without us having to put that in, that be able to do that analysis to run through all our potential kind of movements in that 3D model gave us a really quick solution for identifying where we could put things and what those winds could be. So that was a bit of a surprise because we didn't expect to do that within it. We were just spotting these kind of winds as we went along. I think that's probably our biggest.
Okay, that's really good. Martin?
And I suppose from our side, even though the sort of radio stuff is all mission critical and it's important on the day-to-day stuff, to be able to influence road safety, and I mean, I think we reduced the harm on roads by about 350, which is equivalent to 11 lives saved in Cumbria. So that made a real impact, and it was very rewarding to be part of that work.
Okay, that's really good. That's really good. And obviously, I know you guys, you've said about pros and cons to all of the journey kind of you're taking. We're kind of using more location data, which could be OS data, other data. So we're kind of doing all of that and trying to use as much information. As we said at the start, there's loads of information out for everyone to use. What would you say has been because it is still conceptual, we understand that. What has been the biggest barrier to adoption?
From our side, it's the commonality between the data sources. Everybody records things in slightly different ways. Some of the data quality has been challenging, so it's been able to pick those simple elements that we know are right. That's been the challenge, and being able to then transfer that between different forces and areas. The DFT figures, because they're ratified, they're a year out of date in effect. So trying to get people to access the right data has been a challenge.
Yeah, brilliant.
I mean, I guess for us, it's finding that one win, isn't it? It's that result, that selling point, that widget, isn't it? Would you say?
Yeah, we've tried and tested a lot of different things, and we've got a lot of different ideas of where we could take it. Sometimes getting the data, obviously data quality is always an issue. So getting the right data, making sure it's accurate, and also probably the drone imagery. So getting the drone imagery and flying those flights regularly enough to be able to complete that problem solving effectively.
Okay, that's really good. And I'm just going to pick up on something you said just now in terms of that data quality, which is always almost a subjective thing. When is it good enough? When is the data good enough? Is there a kind of a line? Was there a threshold, or do you just kind of just see as much as you can collect, and it does depend on the source? When is it good enough? Is that
I suppose for us, we just take as much data as we possibly can, and to give a richer picture as we can. So we just use the data we can get. Everybody's trying to get the right data in, but it's down to the individual at the end of the day, which we don't have a lot of control over. But the more data, the better is what we find.
That's good. Our data sources just kept growing, didn't they? The more work we did, the more we thought, oh, we could add this in. So the lights, the CCTV, we were quite pleasantly surprised, weren't we, that it did seem to match up. And because we had the designing out crime officer doing the walk around as part of the environmental visual audit, we had that check and balance throughout. So he was out there doing it anyway. So it was a really good way of testing the concept and seeing if it worked.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think the only issue with the data, as Ceri covered, is it's really difficult to get the drones to do those regular flights, to spend the time doing it, to do the planning for it, and actually be able to use drones that are able to capture massive areas, but are also light enough to be able to fly over uninvolved people. And there's just a whole world there. And then some of the data from the council as well probably wasn't collected perfectly on their end, but it validated what we thought, so it was good enough for what we needed.
Oh, that's brilliant. So the more data is, the better the quality that you get at the end of it. Thank you. So I guess I'm just going to draw a line and just ask in the audience if anyone has any questions for any of the panelists.
That was fascinating. Thank you very much for that. I want to pick up on your discussion there about data points, because you're sending a drone up every month or so. You're sometimes doing special planned flights, if there's a particular operation, big event you're planning for. But at the same time, you've got cops on the street with body-worn videos. You've got cars driving around with their dash cams. Is there a way of integrating that data, that footage that's being captured on a daily basis into your model cities?
So it raises a couple of points. So the imagery that we would collect would have to have some kind of geo-reference to it. They'd have to be a kind of an X and a Y for where those images were taken. But on that note, there's a company that we're working with who's here that we've met with today, who have cameras that you can attach to hats and things, and they collect two pictures every second as you move around with them, and that can be combined with that drone model so that you can get that kind of ground level data to go with your drone model and then have a more complete kind of picture of where that is. And we were talking to them yesterday, actually, in fact, about could we start to capture our high streets and allow even a kind of Google Street View virtual tour of those streets, but also be able to tag in the intelligence we're seeing as we move around. And because it's such a fast turnaround doing that ground level, you don't have to worry about drones, you don't have to fly over people. We could send someone out every single day. It could be the people that are doing those visual audits. We just put the hat on them, they collect what they want, and then at the end of it, we've got that 3D model then of all of that site. And we can either use that on its own, or we could then combine that with drones. But that is a point we've had, and that's a point we've had with LiDAR companies who've got cars and they're trying to work with us, and they're saying, why don't we just drive our car? It's difficult to fly drones. There's lots of issues, but a car could just fly. But on the other side, you wouldn't have picked up those rooftop kind of issues we saw, those smaller areas. So I think there's a lot of solutions. It's just finding one that fits for our project, I guess.
Yeah. You can't just put those hats on the traffic wardens and kind of leave them to it.
That's
So I
perfect.
have to ask, why is it necessary that you use your own police drones? And I don't mean to put you on the spot here because Egbe is from Ordnance Survey. Is it because OS isn't very good that you need to use your own stuff?
I could come in now if you want me to. I guess I'll be the first person to say that we're learning. As I said, we've been mapping the country for over 225 years. And so as a really old company, we have been historically slow at adapting, and now we understand the community needs. So in terms of a lot of the work that the guys are doing and the engagement is ensuring that we're trying to keep up with that. So for example, with the drones, is that something that we could do to start to collate all of it to make sure it's one pot that everyone can use? So yes, the short answer is that yes, we've been a bit slow, but we're trying to learn. And where possible, we're not saying we will deliver it all. So is that something we can partner, collaborate with our partners? That's why we've got our mapping zone there with a few of our partners around us. There's some of them in the room. So it's just us being a bit mature and seeing how we can meet the needs of our customers. So short answer, we've been a bit slow, but we're being calculated about it.
Ceri, you're the problem-solving lead. What are the problems that you still face?
Oh, there's multiple problems. There's always problems to fix. But I think that what's really good about this is just trying and testing out solutions. So before we spend the money on a response that may or may not work, can we test it first? So I have members of staff that will go out and identify those problems. If it is a CCTV issue, is it a lighting issue in relation to violence against women and girls? Is it something that we can change that environment to try and rectify the problem? And can I test it first before I spend the money on implementing it? And really, then we can see that effectiveness. One of the major problems in policing is that we don't always assess to see if what we have implemented works. Through the 3D mapping and the modelling, we are able to see the impact. So I can see whether crime drops in that area. I can see if there's a correlation between that lighting, that graffiti, that recessed doorway and that broken window. And then if I can look at that across the whole force area, I might be able to solve multiple problems in one win, really.
Yeah. If you've got a question, stick your hand up. We'll get the microphone to you. In the meantime, Martin, can I ask you, you talked about the roads policing challenge in Cumbria and detecting these hotspots, seeing where these injuries, these fatalities were. And sometimes the response to that is put up a speed camera and let the highways agency know, and they can kind of maintain a visible presence. blue light personnel in the room will understand why that's an important response. The public sometimes are difficult to persuade.
Yep.
When you say, oh, we found this place where all these people are speeding, so we're going to whack up a speed camera and start collecting some cash. How do you address those challenges when it comes to the messaging?
Yeah, so we very much push it out on the harm and that balance of harm. So we identify that lives are lost, serious injuries are at this location. And so it does give it that legitimisation of this is what we're trying to resolve, rather than, well, we've put this speed camera here, why? Well, it's just on a straight bit of road that we can get cars. No, there's a reason for it. The reason is that these number of people have been killed and speed was a contributing factor. Therefore, this is saving lives, not making money.
It's great when technology can support frontline officers in saving lives. Sometimes there's the view that it's actually put in place of officers, and then the officers are either sent away elsewhere or they just simply don't exist.
Yep.
Do you try and balance the frontline community engagement with the tech that you're putting in?
Yeah. So last December we had the first December in recorded history for Cumbria that we didn't have any road deaths that were attributed to drink or drug driving. But we also had by far the highest number of stops for drink and drug driving, and that was and we're trying to work out which was the cause and which was the benefit. But if we're dealing with less fatalities, it means we can be more proactive. And as I tried to say before, prevention is a lot better than detection. If we can prevent things happening, it's a lot better than cleaning up afterwards. Yeah. And that's where the focus is. So if we can redirect officers to be able to be proactive rather than reactive, that's the benefit.
Rob and Ceri, can I ask you, chief constables, if there's one thing they don't like, it's spending money. When you knock on your chief's door and say, hello, sir, we'd like £100,000 for a new plane, please. How do you get that over the line?
I think we're quite lucky that I think our force has just spent several tens of thousands on a new fixed wing drone, which would be absolutely brilliant for this and could potentially have a parachute and other items that hopefully will get us over the line with doing those more frequent and bigger flights. But luckily the drones are up there collecting data and doing other stuff with the tech that's useful for us. So there's multiple use cases in that. And then on the other note, the 3D models, as on their own merit, they don't just feed that one department. They don't just have to be a problem-solving tool. They could be used for a counter-terrorism tool, an ops planning tool. They can provide multiple departments. So hopefully we can put a good enough case across that we can benefit multiple departments in each of these flights.
I know you're biased, but Rob, this is your third year speaking at the Emergency Tech Show. Are Devon and Cornwall really leading the way in mapping solutions for policing?
Well, I thought I was going to get like a free medal or something for that. But no, yes, I am biased, but we're really lucky that we got, as you know, we got quite a lot of funding through the G7 when that was in Cornwall in 2021, and a lot of the money that was spent on our 3D Geo project, which we're currently running, came from that central government and was used to protect the VVIPs when they were in our force. And what we've been able to do with that is then keep that technology and actually run with it and use the lessons that were learned to kind of propel us ahead of a lot of other forces that might not have had that opportunity.
Fascinating. Any questions before we... Yes, one over there.
Hello. The Torquay example, I think, was a really interesting one. It throws up a lot of questions about potentially, if you're looking at those hotspot areas, they're presumably areas being high crime areas where the local residents would probably appreciate more officer visibility rather than less, and perhaps appreciate drones flying overhead less than they would seeing an officer walking around. So it's an interesting one. I wonder how you sort of maybe thought about that as part of the project. But also, it was interesting, I think what Ceri said was, it seems like you're still on the search for that one sort of thing that makes it all wash its own face. So what do you think it is that's preventing you from finding that one? Because it's not for a lack of crime, obviously, but what is actually stopping you finding that one sort of as states we use the word killer
Yeah,
application.
the widget.
That
yeah.
makes it all worth it.
I think there's a few things that we're still investigating. What we really would like to do is to work with the developers who are developing the town, and Ceri's team are working with them to design that in a way that then lowers crime. But if we could get hold of those 3D models, those BIM models, those architect models of how that town could look, and we could sit that in our 3D Torquay, and we could say, actually, we've got a 3D Torquay, but you've got a 3D Torquay of 2026 as well. This is how it's going to look. This is where your lighting's going to be. This is all of your stuff. And you can all joint multi-agency work within that kind of future Torquay and look at what those problems would be and go back and have that good feedback. Then for a relatively cheap project, I think at the moment on the 3D thing, we've probably spent no more than like 3, 4, 5 grand to get to where we've got. So it's not an expensive project, but we're finding that those developers and the council are really, I don't want to say too much, they're not as easy to work with perhaps as we might want in being able to provide us with that kind of future model, that future picture. So we're hoping to get hold of that and work with them and get that. And I think that'll give us a real win. And then I think the other side really is that legal side. We are held back with what we can fly at the moment. So getting back to what you're saying about having police drones flying around and the public seeing that the police are there and that they're doing stuff's brilliant. But the problem is at the moment, if we use our heavier drones, they can't fly over uninvolved people. So they're going to be where people aren't when they do that flight. So at the moment we fly at 6 a.m. or we fly at 7 p.m, and we try and minimize everything and put all of these things in order so that we can present that we should be flying at that time and that we can. Or we have to use very small drones that wouldn't represent the police at all, and the public wouldn't know that the police were there doing anything. So, as we say, it's a kind of a very investigative pilot that we're doing at the moment. If we could prove that there was some cost saving in doing it, if we can get those regular flights going, and we can say, here's your 3D model every month, and we did that, and now we can show you that the graffiti's down, this is down, this is down, and we've learned a lot, and we can analyse that. I think we could look at saving time of people being out there. We could look at being safer. But the rules around drones are probably hindering that and the availability to do that at the moment.
We're only early in, aren't we? We're only sort of 6 months to a year in. We haven't really truly assessed exactly the benefits yet. And we're starting to see them. We're seeing the outcomes. We're seeing the short-term wins. We can see huge opportunity in that longer-term future planning. It's just getting the information, getting the data that we need to really embrace that. And then just on the point in relation to the visibility of officers. So designing out crime officers, they aren't police officers. So the community wouldn't notice whether they were walking past or not. But what the 3D model does help us to do is to direct the patrol. So using it in the hotspot policing locations, for example. And this is where we started off before it developed further and further, was to use it as a briefing tool for officers so they were really clear on where the problem locations were and that they were walking down the right streets at the right time to deal with the problems. So that's where we started. So hopefully, if anything, it will help to direct the officers and provide more visibility to the community where they're asking for it than less.
Fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Remember that by taking time to learn from our speakers, you can earn CPD points from our partner CPDme. So do check out the link in the show notes. Our thanks to MSA Safety for their continued support for our podcast, and to Smart Digital for producing this series. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.